Now here's your host, Gary Shorman.
The program I do is Forward Ever, leading in challenging times. And certainly this has been a challenge all the way up to an all-night extravaganza where you had to work all night long in the Senate working on some things. How do you stay awake all night long working on this stuff? What does that mean? Are you reading the bill at that point? Or are you just pinching yourself to stay awake all night? What happened?
Well, I don't know that people really want a lesson about the Senate procedures, but let me say it this way. So most legislative votes require 60 votes in the Senate. That means Republicans and Democrats have to some degree come together to get 60 votes. There aren't 60 Republicans, there aren't 60 Democrats. There's a process called reconciliation, and it sets that rule aside, and you can reconcile, if you pass a budget, which we have done, you can reconcile your spending to that budget. And those votes can be accomplished with 51. So ever so often, Democrats did this when they had the majority. They did a reconciliation bill, mostly related to the Green New Deal, environmental issues, climate change. Republicans are reconciling in this bill their budget and their spending. And so part of the process is that there is an unlimited amount of amendments that can be offered during this process. And so until everybody gets tired and gives up, which means you generally do this overnight, all day. In this case, it was, 20, 30 hours. Went through the night on all day Monday, through the night and all day Tuesday. And there are couches that surround the United States Senate and the rooms that surround the United States Senate, but those votes last 10 minutes. And so to actually take a nap is a pretty difficult thing.
You got to be there. Well, one of the things, and I thought about you several times this week because of that whole process, and so much to consider the actual bill itself, and we want to get into that. The big, beautiful bill that is 900 plus pages long, the comprehension of that. And in that, any bill, there's good and bad. You, at one point, were looking at it one way. You changed and looked at it some other ways. What were the good things you saw in that? Then we'll talk about some of the things you don't like in that bill.
Gary, I would say it differently than the way you led into that question. I don't know that I changed. What I said early on, a month ago or more, that I am concerned about the issue of rural hospitals in particular, but healthcare generally in Kansas. People who know me know that I come from the rural part of our state. It's what I care a lot about, and I want rural communities to have a future. And healthcare, the access to healthcare is really important. If a town loses its hospital, the chances that it will ever return are minimal. And so we wanted to make sure, and in part, I gave a speech on the Senate floor so that the leaders of the Senate who were working to put this bill together knew they had somebody who was paying attention to the issue of Medicaid reimbursements to hospitals generally across our state, but particularly to our smallest hospitals, generally called critical access hospitals. And so my remarks were designed to give a heads up that we need to make sure that we pay attention to Medicaid. And getting 51 votes, while that's easier perhaps in most instances than getting 60, getting 51 votes is a very difficult thing on the issues that are included in this bill. And so we have paid attention and worked to get changes in the bill that better protect hospitals in Kansas and give them a brighter opportunity to care for the citizens of their community. I care, and Medicaid has some issues to deal with that deal with people at lower incomes, with people with disabilities. I care a lot about both of those, particularly people with disabilities. And so there were changes in who qualifies for benefits for Medicaid, and the changes were related to people who are here illegally and people who should be working if they can. And it doesn't affect anybody who's on Medicaid today. So any Kansan that's already on Medicaid, no changes. But if you're a part of the expansion of Medicaid, and Kansas is not, so we're even impacted significantly less in this bill, it really says that in the future, people have to, if they can work, they don't have kids, if they're not going to school, they ought to have a job and work 80 hours a month or do community service. So that's the changes for the actual recipients, but important to everybody in Kansas, including those who have little or no income to pay for health care, is whether or not there's a hospital in their community or in their region that can see them. And, the law requires if you show up at a hospital, they're going to care for you. And so keeping hospital doors open affect everybody, including people on Medicaid or people who were on Medicaid.
Am I right? There's two parts to that. There's one part that is preserving that funding, but secondly, there's an emergency fund that was put into place.
So the end result on how we are helping hospitals is that we made certain that there was no changes for the next 2 years in the reimbursement to our hospitals, and so giving them a chance. But the plan under this bill is that Medicaid reimbursements are taking steps downward as far as a percentage. And so a percentage will not, there's no reduction at all for 2 years, and then begins the process of kind of lowering the amount that Medicaid provides for the services that people need. And as a result, we have 2 years of higher current rates, and then there's a delay before they're even reduced. So that gives us a chance to make sure that we're in a better position to handle any changes. And certainly in 2 years, those requirements may be different and better.
One thing about in this bill that you don't hear about on the national media, because a lot of times they're just the bullet points of either good news, bad news, depends on what network you watch. But farm and agriculture, that's another one of the key things. I know you pay a lot of attention to that.
Gary, thanks for the shift. Let me answer the bit of your last question next. What that means is that Kansas will receive 4.9.
While everyone's talking about the high cost of medicine, CVS Health is doing something about it, lowering the cost of care for millions of Americans by making the medicines they need more affordable and accessible, with average out-of-pocket only $8 a month, and most paying less than $100 a year. And by accelerating the use of new biosimilars, we're making some of the most expensive and effective new drugs available for $0 out of pocket, while delivering over $1 billion in savings. CVS Health, lowering the cost of care in America.
$1 billion more under this bill over the next 5 years than what we receive today in Medicaid. And then you mentioned this fund. We also created a fund with $50 billion in it that will be grants to the states to help the hospitals who are the most fragile. And that's expected to be another $1 billion a year for the next 5 years. So you asked me what changed, or how was I more comfortable with particularly the Medicaid part of this bill? And that's the answer. And then you're right. This bill, while Medicaid has received a lot of attention, this bill has a significant number of components that are really important. One, it's designed to reduce the deficit and debt. It doesn't do enough of that, but it's a step in the right direction. And so the Senate estimates that it's about $1.6 trillion reduction in debt. That's an overall issue. And then the tax code that was passed in 2017, it was a 10-year tax code, and it expires. And so people's tax rates would go up. Average family in Kansas would pay $2,600 more a year if we didn't lock in the tax rates that were put in place in 2017. So this bill does that. And then Republicans and Democrats, when it comes to the appropriations process, can't agree on. The Democrats generally want to increase domestic spending, and Republicans want to increase defense spending. So every time we try to reach an agreement, it means we have to spend a whole bunch more money on domestic spending to get more money on defense spending. And I actually think our country is in a difficult circumstance. Our adversaries are on the march. Iran in the Middle East and terrorist proxies, what China wants to do now and in the future, Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. And those countries are aligning in opposition to the United States, our way of life, our role in the world. And our defense spending is not kept up with the challenges. And so there's increased defense spending in this bill. And finally, also immigration and border protection. This bill provides the money for finishing the wall, provides the money for immigration courts and immigration attorneys, immigration detention. So border security, national security, tax code, taxes not going up, and a bit, though insufficient, of deficit reduction. That's really what the whole bill is about. But added to it, to get to your question, is the Farm Bill, which because of partisan differences has not been passed.
How long have the Farm Bill been out there, hanging out there?
6 years.
6 years.
So we have the same Farm Bill that we had 6 years ago, and things have changed. Input costs are tremendously higher. The weather has not been our friend. And so this bill includes the Farm Bill. So another reason that it would be important for us to come to an agreement on how to get a bill passed, including for me, because I put myself on the Ag Committee. I'm on the committee on committees that assign senators to their committees, and I put myself on the Ag Committee this year to get a Farm Bill done. And we couldn't get it done in the normal kind of way we were doing it. We just kept extending it. And this bill includes the major provisions of what we would be looking for in a farm bill to take care of Kansas farmers in some of the most difficult times when the costs of fuel, fertilizer, natural gas, all are skyrocketing. And the Farm Bill safety net was stuck at what it was 6 years ago.
You know, one of the things I know is that you're from here. You're around here, whether it be the oil and gas guys, the ag guys, dealing with security, all those sort of things. Feels like you come from this base, but that doesn't stop people from saying, hey, this bullet point over here, I don't like it. But how do you, that reconciling all the different things into one thing to get it through. So at least we have, and I think with the election, a new look at how we want to do. And that's what this bill is about.
I spend a lot. I still come home every weekend. I still spend time.
Well, you're home
with
now.
Kansans.
You're right here in the KYS studio.
Yes,
That's
sir.
like home base.
It is
home
absolutely
base.
home. Maybe the first place I ever did a radio interview was probably in this studio. And we pay attention to Kansans, and I certainly know this part of Kansas, and really, I think I have a pretty good feel for every aspect of our state. And this is something that is known to me. And you mentioned the oil and gas industry. In this bill, we repeal the methane rules, which our oil and gas guys will know what that means, something they've been trying to do for a long time. I mean, there's just bits and pieces that make a difference to a number of things in the Kansas economy. And, you know, when we were talking about hospitals, I have visited every hospital. I probably visited 40% of all the hospitals in Kansas. There's 229 or something now in the last couple of years. I'm in this part of Kansas because we cut a ribbon on a new healthcare clinic in Hill City yesterday. And we pay a lot of attention to what goes on in the ability for people to access healthcare. I mean, I know it from my own life. My parents in Plainville would have been asked or told by their son and daughter, if there was no hospital and no doctor there, we would have said, Mom, Dad, you need to move, and you need to move where you can get access to health care. And wherever that would have been someplace that wasn't home. And so my parents, who lived well into their 90s, had the opportunity, because there is a hospital in Rooks County, had the opportunity to live among the people they grew up with, live among the people who were their friends, and be surrounded by people who cared for them and took care of them as they got older.
What do you tell the people, and we'll wrap things up because you're out of time. We're going to talk this next week a little bit more in depth about all these things. What do you tell people that are frustrated just in general? Because, you know, there's left, there's right, there's middle, there's all this. How do they find out more so maybe there's not so much frustration?
Gary, it's a really good question, and I appreciate it. I mean, politics has changed significantly since I was first elected to office, and people are more skeptical, less trusting, and they read and see things on social media that become a significant part of the way they look at things.
True or false?
And it's a real problem today. I mean, no one knows who to believe. But this will sound odd coming from me, and people are so intense on politics, and I certainly wouldn't deny that they should be. Pay attention and engage. But let's figure out how we have a conversation among ourselves that's based on, a mutual level of respect that we desperately need in this country. And I am one who works hard at finding, again, you can't pass a bill in the United States Senate with these few exceptions unless Republicans and Democrats come to some agreement. And I did not go to Washington, D.C. to do nothing. And I recognize that people have different points of view in Kansas, but across the country. And you have to bridge those things if you ever want to accomplish something. I would also point out, again, about Kansas and rural America. We know who our neighbors are. We know whether they're Republicans or Democrats. We know whether they're Protestant or Catholic. We get along because we have to work together for the betterment of our community. And we just need more opportunities, more people who are, roll up their sleeves and say, set aside some of the differences and see if we can find a common ground.